This is a debate that I've had with other people as well as an internal debate I've had with myself about the college football playoff and what it is doing to the regular season of the sport, what it is doing for the teams, right? I think that there are a lot of benefactors of an expanded college football playoff. You think about schools like Ole Miss, even Notre Dame this year, even though Notre Dame has made multiple 14 college football playoffs, but you think about schools that may never make it to the college football playoff if they don't make it to their conference championship or have some insane 11 and 1, 12 and 0 season that they are not used to having. That is, under the BCS system and the 4-team college football playoff, that was a reality. And now you can win 2 games. I don't know if we're going to see a 3-loss team unless it's like a 3-loss conference champion, which that would be pretty bizarre. But I don't think that we're going to see a 3-loss team. I think we're just going to see a handful of 2-loss teams make this 12-team college football playoff. But it did it devalue the regular season a little bit, has been the argument that I've had. I've been going on saying, oh, this ruins kind of, what about week 3 when Georgia's dealing with South Carolina and it's really, really stressful in the second half. They're going into this thing down, and what if they lose? What if they lose? Well, beforehand, that would be it would be a fatal loss almost, right? One loss and your season really, really changed in college football. There's no margin for error after that. If you want to make the college football playoff or the BCS national championship, you lose a regular season game. There's no margin for error, and maybe that makes the rest of the season not feel as good. So I'm starting to see the counter argument to it. So before I thought, well, that just ruins the juice you get out of that. It ruins the how every single week matters a lot. And where I think I was probably wrong is that every single week is still going to matter because now it's really just one extra game or two that we're talking about. And in terms of college sports, it's very different than the NFL. And obviously, I'm going to use the Falcons for an example. Just because I'm a Falcons fan, this is what I deal with on a weekly basis. With the Falcons, right? Alarm going off. I'll stop that. But with the Falcons, right? Every single week, look, the Falcons have not been good for most of their history, but obviously since that Super Bowl fumble or whatever you want to call it, they haven't been that good. And on a week-to-week basis, the couple years that the playoffs were in contention, every single week did feel like it mattered. Even though you could lose a few games and it'd be okay. You saw the Chiefs, obviously, they didn't have some 15-2 or 14-3 season, right? I think they were like 11-6 or 12-5 heading into the thing. And that's an expanded playoff with the NFL. But as Falcons fan, every single week mattered anyway. Even if there wasn't some 14 playoff at the end where if you lose 1 or 2 games, you're probably out of it. I was making the argument before this that college football that was being taken out of college football with the expanded playoff. I was wrong. All right, so I want to come on here and admit that I think I was wrong about that. What does that mean for Georgia when you've got a schedule like this year's where you're playing a lot of really talented teams? What does it actually mean for the Georgia Bulldogs? Because beforehand, and obviously the last 3 years, Georgia's gone 12-0, and there hasn't been a question. And you thought there wasn't going to be a question heading into last year's college football playoff, and it turned out that there was a 1-game margin for error last year, which is part of what I loved about college football and how every single game just had super high stakes. That's the word I really was looking for. Every single game just had super high stakes for college football, and now I thought that it wasn't, but it's still going to, because even if Georgia does, let's say, drop a game to Alabama or drop a game to Texas, you're not going to feel any differently about that, right? Is that when Atlanta would drop a game to the Panthers or whatever, it didn't make me feel like, man, well, I just care about the next week even less, or because, we're not going to make it anymore. You're going to get there. So I think in college football, it'll still be the same. I'm basically refuting the argument that I made pretty harshly a few months ago. I think that although there are things about the 12-team playoff I don't like, and we could talk about those as well, and I'm sure I've already talked about them. I don't think that this is going to ruin anything. I still think that 12 is too many teams. But what does this mean for Georgia? Ryan Curley from Dawg Posts talking about Georgia in the college football playoff. I think we're going to be talking about that on a yearly basis at this point. I'm seeing a lot of trash talk. Finally, we're starting to get closer to the college football season, and where I'm seeing it the most has been on TikTok. Right? I'm scrolling as I do. I don't go on there as much as I used to, but I'm scrolling on TikTok, and I'm starting to see these videos, and people are like, "Oh, Georgia's going to be 3-0 heading into Tuscaloosa," and then you slide over and you see the next picture, and then it says, "And they'll leave Tuscaloosa 3-1," or the same thing with Texas, like 6-0 or 7-0, and then they'll leave 7-1. The trash talk has started. It is June. And I've seen trash talk against Georgia, specifically from those two fan bases. I think it's pretty funny. But those are the two biggest games that Georgia is going to play this year. It's against Texas and Alabama. And they're both, barring any changes, Texas will be a top 5 team, and Alabama will be a top 10, potentially top 5 team when Georgia goes to each of those locations to play those schools. What if Georgia loses one of them? Okay, well, Georgia is probably still in the SEC championship with a chance for a bye. What if Georgia loses 2 of them? That's a different story, right? Then you're playing the waiting game a little bit. Now, I think if you look at it and you look at last year, Georgia probably still makes it, right? If Georgia goes through this schedule and they beat Clemson, they beat Kentucky on the road, they beat another top 10 team in Ole Miss, it's still going to have a pretty good 10-2 resume, even if it did lose to both Alabama and Texas. But what would probably be taken off the table is that SEC championship, which is your chance to make it to a bye and skip a week. So that is what is probably off the table for Georgia if they lose to both Alabama and Texas, or just any 2 schools. But more specifically them, if you're going to lose, you'd want it to be to them because of the resume thing and the rankings, and that's all going to be added up at the end of the year. If you're going to lose, you're going to want it to be to like the Alabama, the Texas, the Ole Misses of the world. Otherwise, you're going to get penalized more for it. But Georgia, unless they just get blown out by those teams, if Georgia even lost to both those teams, we're talking about Georgia probably still as a top 12 team, most likely a road playoff game for that first those 2 days, right? Where that Friday and Saturday, where there's going to be 1 game on Friday night and 3 games on Saturday. What you're going to see there is it's probably going to be a road playoff game for Georgia if they end up losing to those 2 teams. That's what's at stake. High stakes still, right? Even if you lose, well, what are you still fighting for? You're fighting for a playoff spot. You're fighting to make it easier on yourself to win in the future. So I was already wrong. There are still things that are really high stakes on a week-to-week basis, and you need to get there, right? You need to do it you can't just give up on the team, or the team can't just give up if you lose 2 games, because that is out the window now. Now, I don't think Georgia's going to lose 2 games. I think that there's a chance that they don't lose any games. I'm not giving that official prediction quite yet, but I do think there's a chance that they don't lose any games. We got to get through media days, hear what these coaches and players are saying, see a little bit of fall camp to get a better idea before I make kind of my season-long predictions. And I will come on here and do that in an official. We should do a writing home about that, actually, with our predictions, and we'll have a guideline of I'm going to make that happen with the guys. But you lose 1 game, well, you're probably in the SEC championship. I doubt there's going to be 3 or 4 11-1 SEC teams, probably just 2 of them. If we're being realistic, maybe 3 of them based on the way the schedule fell out. But you lose 1 game, you're probably in the SEC championship, and most likely, at that point, you probably earned a home playoff game. You're probably going to end up, if you lose that SEC championship, being in the 5 through 8 range. So I do think that, yes, there is, in a way, it takes the high stakes out of every single week. It just lowers the stakes a little bit. But in a way, there obviously are still very high stakes on a week-to-week basis, and you get the difference between a bye, a home playoff game, a road playoff game, or not being in the playoff at all. Those are the marginal differences between winning at Texas, winning at Alabama, winning at Ole Miss, maybe losing one of those games. It could be the difference between where you play, and where you play matters a lot in this sport. It doesn't matter as much in professional sports. Obviously, it still matters, but college football crowds are different, and you don't want to be playing a road playoff game at like an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Texas or something like that. And those are the types of schools that are going to be hosting playoff games, like an Oregon or someone along those lines, and you don't want to be playing in those games. That's what you get. So you can't really lose more than one game. You still get that one, hey, can still be a team with a bye, but I think that for Georgia's sake, you don't want to lose both the Texas and the Alabama game. Thanks for watching.